Hello and welcome to the van build vlog. In this video there is no one single bit of work I'm going to show you, rather a collection of odds and sods, different things that I've been doing on the van. Let's start on the roof. And on the roof we find two 100-watt solar panels mounted onto the roof rack, because the van came with the roof rack and it seemed silly not to use it. The power cables from the solar disappear down into the van through this waterproof gland sealed with loads of gungy transparent sealant, and from there down into the solar controller. I haven't presently done anything more in terms of fixing these wires other than putting cable clips around them, as you can see there, just to hold them together. But I probably will tidy them up a bit. You can see they come down there and into the back of the electronics box. I did wonder for quite a while how I was going to attach these panels, but with the roof rack up there it just seemed there ought to be a way, and there is. The way these are designed is that there is this little upside down T-shaped groove that runs the length of the roof rack. So I bought some bolts that are actually designed, I think, for something to do with skiing. I'm not a skier, but I think they were something to do with skiing. And they sit in that groove, and I drilled holes into the aluminium frame of the solar panels, put the bolts in there with the bolt on the other side, if you see what I mean, the locking bolt on the other side, and then slid the panels onto the roof rack. And then they stay in place. And I'm rather pleased that that worked, actually. These end caps then lock into place. A little bit crude, but they do lock into place, and that means the panels shouldn't be able to slide off anytime I go around a corner, particularly enthusiastically. And I've cable tied the wiring up underneath the roof rack bar just to keep a bit of rain off it, really, although the connections are watertight. Obviously, because the panels are sitting above the roof rack, there will be a bit more drag, but I've been out for a long motorway drive in it, and firstly the panels were fine, they stayed tight, didn't come off, and I drove an hour one way and an hour the other way at 70 miles an hour, all fine. So there'll be a bit more drag, so the fuel consumption will be affected, but it didn't seem to be too bad, although I'll keep a proper eye on it. And the only thing I noticed was a slight whistling, which I think is the wind whistling round the panels, but it wasn't horrific. I had to move the rear bar of the roof rack forward. Originally it was behind the roof vent, and obviously that was too long, didn't reach the panels, so I moved it forward, and now they overhang a bit, but that's no problem, and they don't get in the way, as you can see, of the roof vent even when it's tilted upwards. You may be thinking there'll be ne'er-do-wells who rather fancy coming along and hoiking a couple of solar panels off a van roof, and that is why I have also implemented security measures, which, for obvious reasons, I'm not going to show you. It suffices to say that not only do the panels slide on, they are then secured on, and I'm afraid I'm not going to tell you how. It's sufficient, I think, to deter the casual passerby. If somebody really wants them, then just as with any burglary or break-in or theft, if somebody really wants them, there will be ways and means for them to get them. There's pretty much nothing that can't be nicked with the aid of an angle grinder. But you can't really do anything about that, can you? Short of putting the van into a solid concrete bunker and never taking it out. But for the casual thief, I have put in place appropriate levels of security. Other things on the electrics include these two mains power sockets. The top one is coming off the Shoreline 16 amp MCB, and the bottom one comes off the inverter. Now why, you might be saying, not just have one socket and a switch between them? Partly because I couldn't be bothered to wire in the switch, partly because there's a confusion about the earthing on the inverter. It's all terribly complicated, and I did a lot of research into it, and it's to do with floating earths and things, and it all did my head in. So I thought, you know what, I'll just keep it simple, and if I have one for the inverter, which is the bottom one because that's near where the inverter is to remind me, and the top one for the mains. There can be no confusion, and what's more, I can run something off the mains, and then if I need a bit of something else, I can run something else off the inverter. I'm happy with that solution. Works for me. You may recall that where that tiny little knob is was a couple of dangling wires when I showed the electrics, and I said I've got something else to go in there. And that is the on-off and, wait for it, speed controller for the vent. You see, as sold, this vent, which has a switch on it, goes forwards, backwards, but only at one speed, and that speed is very fast and very noisy. So if I wanted to have the fan on overnight, well, you couldn't really, it makes a racket. So I bought, for only about £3 off eBay, this tiny little DC motor speed controller and wired it in to the feed to the fan. And now that switch on the other side turns the fan on, off, and also adjusts how fast it goes. I actually bought two of those speed controllers, slightly different ones, and the other one, which was fractionally more expensive, about £4 I suppose, and substantially bulkier, really didn't like working with the fan. The fan just made this horrid whining noise. I mean, it worked as a speed controller, but if you weren't going at full pelt, the fan was making a horrid whining noise, and I don't quite know what it was, but I didn't like the sound of it, and again, I couldn't have slept with that on, so that was useless. So I don't know what the difference is between the controllers, but the little tiny cheap one worked better than the slightly more expensive one, and I'm ever so pleased with it because it seems daft not to be able to control the speed, because you really don't want it on full blast all the time. While we're here, I have, as you can see, boxed off the battery compartment, so this can now be used for storage, and I've put a lid over the battery terminals. That lid just lifts off if you want it to, with access for the main on-off switch and a little bit more storage down the back there. And in response to a question I had about, doesn't that mean that the main on-off is under a cover, because normally the seat cover would be there? Yes, it is, but then the ones on my boat are way more inaccessible than that, and it's no great hardship to just lift the seat up and turn that on and off. I mean, one shouldn't be making a habit of it, because it'll normally be on, so I'm perfectly happy with that. Meanwhile, on the back of the front panel of the electronics box, I've done this little card of what all the fuses are, and I've laminated it and stuck it on there with Velcro as a little handy reference guide. Incidentally, I've already made my first upgrade. This big thing at the top, the back round black socket there, I did just have a voltmeter there, and I've swapped it out already for one with two USB sockets, and it's a voltmeter as well. It's not showing anything now because I've just turned everything off again. But you can charge two devices there, and it gives you a readout of the battery. And the idea of that being there, of course, is that when I'm having a little snooze at night, I can just put my phone there and charge it from there. So that works for me. As you can see, one of the most exciting things I now have in the van is cushions. Yes, they are black, but I reckon that means they simply complement and work with the kitchen countertop and the tambour door. They are quite thin and quite firm, but that's what I requested. I haven't got the headroom for anything thicker and bouncier, but they're perfectly comfortable, so I'm quite pleased. That one, which forms the backrest when it's in sofa mode, will pull out and go here when the bed is pulled out, and I specifically ordered it just a centimetre or two short so that it would fit in that gap precisely. Meanwhile, that one, which is the equivalent cushion for the front section. I'd like to say I planned for it to fit in that gap down the side, but that was absolute pure fluke. But I'm quite pleased it does. It's a good little storage pocket for it. Another very tiny little addition is this aluminium kick strip across the front, instead of just having the lino flapping around loosely there. Safety first, of course. In a van, that is the second carbon monoxide detector I've got here, in addition to the one that is inside the cupboard near where the heater is. Below that, that's a fire alarm, and then next to that, mounted on the wall, I've also got the fire extinguisher. And those just sit over there in the corner. They had to go there. There was no other practical place that they could sensibly go. If they were there, my head would fall back onto them when I'm sitting on the sofa. I could conceivably put them there, but you've got the same issue. Can't really attach them to the back seats. They certainly don't want to go down there, because when the bed is extended, it would cover up the smoke and carbon monoxide alarms, which could inhibit their operation. So they had to be above bed level, and obviously they can't go above the cooker because they'll just be set off any time I do cooking. So really, that corner was the only place they could sensibly go. I can't remember if I showed you what I did with the fridge. It's gone under here, and I've now hinged this panel so it lifts up, and there is the fridge. And then you actually open it up like that. It's a bit odd, I know, having the two hinges sort of against each other, but there is one version of this fridge which also lifts that way, but it's a slightly smaller capacity, and it was going to cost me more money. So I'm reasonably happy with this. These 12-volt fridges are ferociously expensive. I mean, just ridiculously. This I got on what I consider to be quite a bargain at £375, which is itself absurd, but believe me, that's a bargain in 12-volt fridges. It's a Dometic CF26, I think. It's either CF or CDF, I forget which, but it's actually a good price at £375, and I think I got it at that price because that model is now discontinued, but it works really well. I'm ever so pleased with it. Got a little control panel on the side here where you can set the temperature, and you can freeze stuff in it as well if you want. Not separately, it's either a fridge or a freezer, there's just one temperature for the whole thing. But you can set it and it goes down really quickly, and then doesn't seem to come on and off an awful lot. So yes, very pleased. There's a reasonable amount of space in it. The 26, I think, refers to 26 litres. Arguably, I do need to put some sort of trim, just a flat piece of trim going round where I've put these. This support is to stop this thing flying forward in case of any heavy braking. And the reason I've left all the gap round this anyway is because it has to have ventilation. There is an inlet fan this side, and there's a hot air outlet fan that side, so you can't really have too much stuff around this. So I left this big gap for ventilation, but I do wonder whether a bit of trim, just to make it look a little bit nice around here, and then it would still have all the air gap around it underneath. And as you can see, it's completely open to the back doors there in terms of that hot air escaping. And as I say, so far it's been working fine, but I'm just wondering about making it look a little bit prettier. That's not an immediate job though, because, well, with the lid down you don't see it. At the back, pretty much as seen before, except that I've added this little bit of trim around here just to try and smarten up this back bit. There's the big vent, there's the vent of hot air that comes out of the fridge, so again it's got all this space to let itself ventilate. And then you've got this cupboard here. I fixed this top piece, so this is not accessible from inside the van. This becomes a rear access cupboard for things like, well, as you can see, I've got a little chair folded up in the black bag there, and I've got a towel and so on. And there's also a little bit of space underneath the fridge where, as you can see, I've got my hookup cable and other bits and bobs can go in there. That is everything I think that I've done on the van lately, but incredibly there still seems to be a humongous mountain of stuff still to be done. I don't quite know how, but but just as you think you're coming to the end, the peak is... It's like climbing a mountain. You get to the peak, you climb the peak, and oh no, that wasn't the summit. There's the summit just come into view. It just keeps moving further and further away. So let's have a look at stuff I still need to do. Well, I still need to put some trim across the join in the ceiling boards. Quite obviously, I need to put some sort of finish on there. Originally I said I wasn't going to carpet it, and now I'm thinking, yeah, I should probably have carpeted that. In the corner here, that is the failed beginnings of a shelf unit that's to go up that corner. I made a version, measured it, cut it, and then it didn't fit. It was so off, it's almost laughable, except I wasn't laughing. I was quite annoyed. So that remains to be redone. And yes, I've still got to cut the carpet to go round the windows. I've been putting this off and putting this off because, as I mentioned in my carpeting vlog, the Veltrim carpet I bought is not stretchy. It's not seemingly in any way stretchy. It's certainly not the four-way stretchy stuff that you see in a lot of van builds. So although it's very thick and good in that respect, it does not want to go around corners. And I'm just dreading doing this and the other door and the rear doors. But it's got to be done. I can't have it looking like that, can I? I need to paint the top edge of the bed unit so that it actually matches the wood underneath, because at the moment all the bare wood sticks out like a sore thumb. And I still haven't made the supports for when you pull the bed out. It just flops down at the moment. I'm thinking I might have a little screw on a little support here, and then that can sit on that. There's just room to put one underneath there. You see, the trouble with putting them along this is that this comes off, that's a door, and the one on the end comes off, so I've got very limited space. But I could put a support on that, which is a post, and there's another post there which wouldn't do for this one because it just misses it, but it would do for that one. Anyway, I need to work on that, check that I can put enough supports in that it would actually support the bed when pulled out. Meanwhile, in exciting LPG news, I had this connection and the connection onto the gas bottle checked by an actual gas load dealer, proper motorhome supplier who are a gas load dealer, and they said yes, the end of the pipe on this and on the bottle are tight enough, go and fill. And I have been for my first LPG fill, which was an interesting experience. Now, I didn't film it, I was too busy doing it. But the bottle is now full of LPG. 11.5 litres, cost me about £6. Absolute bargain. And that's about it, I think. I've had a few people ask if I've actually spent my first night in the van yet, and the answer is no, because I only received the cushions yesterday, really. Well, long story, I got some of the cushions, discovered that although I'd measured the cushions correctly, I'd put a typo on the order for one cushion and made it 10 centimetres too short, so I had to wait for the replacement cushion to come. So I got the full set of cushions only yesterday, so I haven't yet slept in the van, but I will do, and I'm going to go and visit a friend of mine in Surrey fairly soon. It's either the end of this week or next week, and I'm going in the van, and I'll probably stop in the van overnight, and that will be its first proper outing. Whether I'll vlog it or not, I don't know, because I'm going to see a mate rather than going to see any super beautiful Lake District countryside or anything, but perhaps I'll just let you know how it goes. Alright, I think that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. Cheers now. Bye-bye.